a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Murder of Dee Dee Blanchard. Late on the night of June 14, 2015, deputy sheriffs in Greene County, Missouri, United States, found the body of Dee Dee Blanchard Petra, face down in the bedroom of her house just outside Springfield. Lying on the bed in a pool of blood from the stab wounds inflicted several days earlier. There was no sign of her daughter, Gypsy Rose, who according to Blanchard suffered from leukemia, asthma, muscular dystrophy, and several other chronic conditions and had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old due to brain damage she suffered as a result of her premature birth. The Blanchards' neighbors, who notified the police after growing concerned about Facebook posts earlier in the evening, suggested that Dee Dee may have fallen victim to foul play. They were also fearful that Gypsy Rose, whose wheelchair and medications were still in the house, might have been abducted and in serious danger. Police found Gypsy Rose the next day in Wisconsin, where she had traveled with Nicholas Godjohn, a boyfriend she had met online. She was alive and well, but things are not always as they appear, the Greene County sheriff said the next morning. Public outrage that someone might have taken advantage of a severely disabled girl gave way to shock and some sympathy for Gypsy Rose, when investigators announced that she was actually an adult and had none of the physical or mental health issues her mother claimed she had. Further investigation found that some of the doctors who had examined Gypsy Rose, both locally and in the New Orleans area where she and her mother had lived before allegedly being displaced by Hurricane Katrina in 2005, had found no evidence of the claimed disorders. In one case, professionals suspected Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a mental disorder where a parent or other caretaker exaggerates, fabricates, or induces illness in a person under their care to obtain sympathy or attention. Dee Dee had changed her name slightly after her family, who suspected she had poisoned her stepmother, confronted her about how she treated Gypsy Rose. Nonetheless, many people accepted her situation as true, and the two benefited from the efforts of charities such as Habitat for Humanity, Ronald McDonald House, and the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Dee Dee, who reportedly had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, had been making her daughter pass herself off as younger and pretend to be disabled and chronically ill, thus subjecting her to unnecessary surgery and medication, and controlling her through occasional physical and psychological abuse. Munchausen expert Mark Feldman says that this is the first such case in his quarter-century of experience of an abused child killing the parent. Gypsy Rose pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and is serving a 10-year sentence. After a brief trial in November 2018, Godjohn was convicted of first-degree murder and later sentenced to life in prison. The case was the subject of a 2017 HBO documentary, Mommy Dead and Dearest, directed by Erin Lee Carr. Lifetime and Hulu have also produced dramatizations of the case. The case was also the subject of the 2018 documentary Gypsy's Revenge. Early life and marriage of Dee Dee Blanchard. Blanchard was born Claudine Petra in Chack Bay, Louisiana, near the Gulf Coast, in 1967 and grew up with her family in nearby Golden Meadow. During her childhood, relatives recalled, she would occasionally engage in petty theft, often as retaliation when things did not go her way. At some point early in her adult life she worked as a nurse's aide. After her death, the family expressed suspicion that she might have killed her own mother, who died in 1997, by denying her food. When she was 24, she became pregnant by Rod Blanchard, then 17. They named their daughter Gypsy Rose since Claudine liked the name Gypsy, and Rod was a fan of Guns N' Roses. Shortly before Gypsy Rose's birth in July 1991, the couple separated when Rod, as he said in 2017, realized he had got married for the wrong reasons. Despite Claudine's efforts to get him to return, he did not, and she took her newborn daughter to live with her family. Childhood. Bobby Petra, Claudine's nephew, recalls that Gypsy's birth might have been slightly premature, possibly affecting the development of her skull, but other than that she had no known health issues. According to Rod, who remained involved with his daughter at this point, by the time Gyp was 3 months old, her mother was convinced the infant suffered from sleep apnea and began taking her to the hospital. where repeated overnight stays with a sleep monitor and other tests found no sign of the condition. Nevertheless, he recalls, Claudine became convinced that Gypsy had a wide range of health issues, which she attributed to an unspecified chromosomal disorder. When Gypsy was 7 or 8, Bobby recalls, she was riding on her grandfather's motorcycle when he had a minor accident. She suffered an abrasion to her knee, which her mother said was the visible sign of injuries that would require several surgeries to treat properly, and from then on Gypsy was confined to a wheelchair, although he saw signs that she was indeed healthy enough to walk on her own on several occasions. Nonetheless, she often went with her parents to Special Olympics events. In 2001, when Dee Dee claimed she was 8, she was named the honorary queen of the Crew of Mid-City Parade, a child-oriented parade held during Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Gypsy seems to have stopped going to school after 2nd grade, possibly even as early as kindergarten. Her mother homeschooled her after that, supposedly, because her illnesses were so severe. Gypsy managed to learn to read on her own, through the Harry Potter books. While Gypsy's father Rod had remarried, Claudine did not and instead moved in with her father and stepmother, who would later claim that Claudine, when preparing food for her, poisoned it with Roundup weed killer, leading to her own chronic illness during this period. During that time, she was arrested for several minor offenses, including writing bad checks. When the Peters began to regularly confront her about her treatment of Gypsy and expressed suspicion about her role in her stepmother's health, she left with Gypsy for Slidell, although the family would not know this for several years. Her stepmother's health returned to normal shortly afterwards. In Slidell, she and Gypsy lived in public housing. They paid their bills with public assistance Claudine had been granted due to her daughter's supposed medical conditions, and Rod's child support payments. They spent most of their time visiting various specialists, mostly at Tulane Medical Center and the Children's Hospital of New Orleans, seeking treatment of the illnesses Claudine claimed Gypsy suffered from, which she now said included hearing and vision problems. While a muscle biopsy found no sign of the muscular dystrophy Claudine insisted Gypsy had, she was successful in securing treatment for her daughter's other purported issues. After she told doctors Gypsy had seizures every few months, they prescribed anti-seizure medication. Several surgeries were performed on her during this time, and Claudine regularly took Gypsy to the emergency room for minor ailments. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in August 2005, Claudine and Gypsy left their ruined apartment for a shelter in Covington set up for individuals with special needs. Claudine said Gypsy's medical records, including her birth certificate, had been destroyed in the flooding. A doctor there from the Ozarks suggested they relocate to her native Missouri, and the next month they were airlifted there. Moved to Missouri. At first, Claudine and Gypsy lived in a rented home in Aurora, in the southwestern area of the state. During their time there, Gypsy was honored by the Olay Foundation, which advocates for the rights of feeding tube recipients, as its 2007 Child of the Year. In 2008, Habitat for Humanity built them a small home with a wheelchair ramp and hot tub as part of a larger project on the north side of Springfield, to the east, and they moved there. The story of a single mother with a severely disabled daughter forced to flee Katrina's devastation received considerable local media attention, and the community often pitched in to help the woman who now went by Claudine Blanchard, and whom they knew as Dee Dee. The outpouring of support included a great deal of charitable contributions. In Louisiana, mother and daughter had at most availed themselves of occasional stays in Ronald McDonald houses during medical appointments. In Missouri, they received free flights to see doctors in Kansas City, free trips to Walt Disney World, and backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts via the Make-A-Wish Foundation, in addition to the house Habitat built for them. Rod Blanchard also continued to make monthly child support payments of $1,200, as well as sending Gypsy gifts and occasionally talking to her on the phone. Rod and his second wife regularly hoped to get to Springfield and visit, but for a variety of reasons Dee Dee would change plans. She told her neighbors in Springfield that Gypsy Rose's father was an abusive drug addict and alcoholic who had never come to terms with his daughter's health issues and never sent them any money. Many people who met Gypsy were charmed by her, Her 5 feet height, nearly toothless mouth, large glasses and high, childlike voice reinforced the perception that she had all the problems her mother said she did. She often wore wigs or hats to cover her baldness. Her mother regularly shaved Gypsy's head to mimic the hairless appearance of a chemotherapy patient. When they left the house, Dee Dee often took an oxygen tank and feeding tube with them. Gypsy was fed the children's liquid nutrition supplement Pediasure well into her 20s. Dee Dee used physical abuse to control her daughter, always holding her daughter's hand in the presence of others. Whenever Gypsy said something that either suggested she was not really sick or seemed above her purported mental capabilities, Gypsy recalls that her mother would give her a very tight squeeze. When the two were alone, Dee Dee would strike her with her open hands or a coat hanger. Medical interventions continued. Dee Dee had some of Gypsy's saliva glands treated with Botox, then extracted altogether, to control her drooling, which Gypsy later claimed her mother had induced by using a topical anesthetic to numb her gums before doctor visits. Tubes were implanted in her ears to control her myriad purported ear infections. Suspicions of deceptive behavior. Bernardo Flasterstein, a pediatric neurologist who saw Gypsy in Springfield, became suspicious of her muscular dystrophy diagnosis. He nevertheless ordered MRIs and blood tests, which found no abnormalities. "I don't see any reason why she doesn't walk," he told Dee Dee on a follow-up visit after seeing Gypsy stand and support her own weight. Flasterstein noted that Dee Dee was not a good historian. After contacting Gypsy's doctors in New Orleans, he learned that Gypsy's original muscle biopsy had come back negative, undermining Dee Dee's self-reported diagnosis of muscular dystrophy, as well as her claim that all Gypsy's records had been destroyed by flooding. He suspected the possibility of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Dee Dee contrived to gain access to Flasterstein's notes and subsequently stopped taking Gypsy to see him. Flasterstein did not follow up by reporting Dee Dee to social services. He said he had been told by other doctors to treat the pair with golden gloves, and doubted the authorities would believe him anyway. In 2009, an anonymous caller told the police about Dee Dee's use of different names and birth dates for herself and her daughter, and suggested Gypsy was in better health than claimed. Officers who performed the resulting wellness check accepted Dee Dee's explanation that she used the misinformation to make it harder for her abusive ex-husband to find her and Gypsy, without checking this story out with Rod, and reported that Gypsy seemed to genuinely be mentally handicapped. The file was closed. Growing independence of Gypsy. While those close to Gypsy still believed she was a teenager, by the 2010s she was in fact an adult, and began to test the limitations of her mother's scheme. A neighbor recalls an incident either in 2009 or 2010 where Gypsy showed up at her door one night, without her wheelchair, seeking a ride to a local hospital to visit a man with whom she shared a romantic interest. The man had been assaulted by a group of people familiar with Gypsy's medical history, who felt that he was taking advantage of a mentally challenged underage girl. At the hospital, Gypsy produced a birth certificate that gave her correct date of birth, proving that she was of legal age. Dee Dee went to the hospital, where she said that that birth certificate was an incorrect version issued after Katrina, apparently proving it with the real birth certificate giving a more recent birth date. Reportedly, Gypsy was made to apologize to all present. Since 2001, Gypsy had attended science fiction and fantasy conventions, sometimes in costume, since she could blend in, even in her wheelchair. At an event in 2011, she made what may have been another escape attempt that ended when her mother found her in a hotel room with a man she had met online. Again, Dee Dee produced the paperwork giving Gypsy's false, younger birth date, and threatened to inform the police. Gypsy recalls that afterward, Dee Dee smashed her computer with a hammer and threatened to do the same to her fingers if she ever tried to escape again. She also kept Gypsy leashed and handcuffed to her bed for 2 weeks. Dee Dee later told Gypsy that she had filed paperwork with the police claiming that Gypsy was mentally incompetent, leading Gypsy to believe that if she attempted to go to the police for help, they would not believe her. Sometime around 2012, Gypsy, who continued to use the internet after her mother had gone to bed to avoid her tightened supervision, made contact online with Nicholas Godjohn, a man around her age from Big Bend, Wisconsin. Godjohn had some issues of his own, a criminal record for indecent exposure and a history of mental illness, stated at times to be either dissociative identity disorder or autism. In 2014, Gypsy confided to Aaliyah Woodmansee, a 23-year-old neighbor who, unaware that Gypsy was really close to her own age, considered herself a big sister, that she and Godjohn had discussed eloping, and had even chosen names for potential children. Gypsy, who had 5 separate Facebook accounts, and Godjohn flirted online, their exchanges sometimes using BDSM elements, which Gypsy has since claimed was more what he was interested in. Woodmansee tried to talk her out of it, still thinking Gypsy too young and possibly being taken advantage of by an online sexual predator. She considered Gypsy's plans just fantasies and dreams, and nothing like this would ever really take place. Despite Dee Dee's efforts to prevent her from using the internet, which went as far as destroying her daughter's phone and laptop, she maintained contact with Woodmansee, who saved printouts of the posts Gypsy shared, until 2014. The next year Gypsy arranged and paid for Godjohn to meet her mother in Springfield. Her plan was for him to just bump into her while she and Dee Dee were at a movie theater, both of them in costume, and apparently strike up a relationship that way, then for her to introduce him to her mother. As soon as they did meet for the first time in real life, Godjohn says, Gypsy led him to the bathroom, where the two had sex. However, she apparently did not find him as desirable in person as he had seemed online. Dee Dee said he was creepy. The two continued their internet interactions, however, and began developing their plan to kill Dee Dee. Murder. Godjohn returned to Springfield in June 2015, coming down while Gypsy and her mother were away at a doctor's appointment. After they had returned home and Dee Dee went to sleep, Gypsy let him know, and he went to the Blanchard house. Gypsy allowed him in and allegedly gave him duct tape, gloves and a knife with the understanding that he would use it to murder Dee Dee. Gypsy claimed later that she did not expect him to be able to do it. Godjohn ordered Gypsy to hide in the bathroom and cover her ears so that she would not have to witness her mother's death. Godjohn then stabbed Dee Dee several times in her sleep. The two had sex in Gypsy's room, took $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee had been keeping in the house, mostly from her ex-husband's child support checks, and fled to a motel outside Springfield. They may have remained for several days while planning their next move. During that time they were seen on security cameras at several local stores. Gypsy said at that point she believed the two of you had managed to get away with their crime. They mailed the murder weapon back to Godjohn's home in Wisconsin to avoid being caught with it, then took a bus there. Several witnesses saw the pair on their way to the Greyhound station and noted that Gypsy wore a blonde wig and walked unassisted. On the afternoon of June 14, at Gypsy's urging, Godjohn used his phone to post 2 updates to Dee Dee's Facebook page, so that people would discover the body. The first reads simply, "That bitch is dead," followed 17 minutes later by a longer comment suggesting that whoever left it had violently killed Dee Dee and raped Gypsy. Gypsy would later state that she was concerned that several days had passed without anyone discovering her mother's body, and that she hoped that someone would report the ominous message to the police so that they would find the body. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?